You know, the B-17 Flying Fortress is one of those machines that almost defines World War II. On paper, it looked unstoppable. 4 engines, long range, 13 machine guns scattered all around its body, and the ability to take an unbelievable amount of damage. It became a symbol of Allied strength, earning that nickname, Flying Fortress, for a reason. But for the crews who actually flew in it, the reality couldn't have been further from glamorous. Every mission felt like a one-way trip through hell, and for thousands, that's exactly what it turned out to be. When it first entered service, the B-17 was a technological marvel. Compared with other planes of its era, it was huge, powerful, and built for high-altitude bombing, cruising around at around 18,000 feet. But the aircraft wasn't pressurized, which meant the men on board had to wear oxygen masks just to breathe. Up there, the air was thin and the temperatures dropped to around minus 60 degrees Celsius. Inside, it was basically an airborne freezer. Crews had to wear electrically heated suits to keep from freezing solid. And even then, those suits sometimes shorted out or tore during combat. Imagine that, you're thousands of feet above the ground, surrounded by metal that's colder than ice, and your only protection is a heated suit that might quit at any moment. If someone got hit and started bleeding, the blood could actually freeze before it even left the wound. As horrible as that sounds, that sometimes saved lives because the cold stopped the bleeding. But frostbite was a constant threat. The crew wore heavy gloves because touching any metal surface with bare skin meant the flesh would just stick and peel off instantly. Gunners clearing jammed weapons could easily lose fingers, and many did. Despite all this, the B-17 was considered stable, and that stability was essential. These bombers didn't fly alone. They moved in tight formations, dozens at a time, packed closely together so their overlapping fields of fire created a kind of defense shield. It looked impressive in training films, but in practice it was terrifying. Just getting into formation was one of the most dangerous parts of a mission. Hundreds of planes taking off in 30-second intervals, climbing, turning, and trying to slot into place. One wrong move and mid-air collisions were inevitable. During training alone, more than 2,800 airmen were killed just learning how to fly together. Once they were in the air, the biggest threat was waiting for them: German air defences. The Germans had perfected anti-aircraft warfare, and their infamous 88mm flak cannons could reach altitude of 30,000 feet, easily high enough to hit the B-17s. These guns fired shells that exploded at preset heights, scattering shrapnel through the night sky. Even a near miss could tear holes through the fuselage or wings. The worst part was the unpredictability. You never knew when those black clouds of flak would appear or which one would have your name on it. Crews could see planes around them taking hits, breaking apart, or just vanishing in midair when bombs or fuel tanks exploded. Watching a friendly aircraft fall away without any parachutes opening, that kind of thing haunted these men for the rest of their lives. And, as if flak wasn't bad enough, there were the German fighters. Aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf 190 were brutally efficient. They used coordinated head-on attacks going straight for the cockpit and engines, then circling around for side or rear shots. Their cannons could shred a bomber in seconds. The B-17's designers thought that 13 machine guns would keep the fighters at bay, but that turned out to be wishful thinking. Early in the war, Allied bombers often flew without full fighter escort because the escort planes simply didn't have the range. Later, when the long-range P-51 Mustang entered service, losses finally began to drop, but by then thousands of airmen had already been killed. Inside the aircraft, every crew position came with its own kind of danger. Up front, the pilot and co-pilot worked shoulder to shoulder in a cramped cockpit. Behind them were the navigator and bombardier, and then the radio operator. The gunners, waist, tail, top, and ball turret manned their positions surrounded by noise, vibration, and freezing air. The tail gunner probably had the loneliest job on the plane, crouched over twin 50 caliber guns, staring out the back for enemy fighters. The waist gunners, who stood at the open side windows, had it worst when it came to cold and exposure. They had almost no protection, no seat, and no room to move. The wind blasted in at -60, and if the plane crash landed, they were often crushed where they stood. The ball turret gunner, though, might have drawn the most terrifying assignment of them all. His small spherical turret hung from the belly of the bomber. He had to curl himself inside it, separated from the rest of the crew, with his parachute stored elsewhere, because there wasn't space for it inside. If the hydraulics jammed or power was lost, he couldn't rotate the turret to the right position to climb out. Many never made it out when their planes went down, and if the landing gear failed, that ball turret was the first thing to hit the ground, often with the gunner still inside. When a B-17 was hit, the crew had only moments to react. If the plane could still fly, the pilot would try to limp home, sometimes on just 2 engines. There are countless stories of bombers returning with holes the size of cars in their fuselage, engines burning, and half their crew wounded or dead. If the aircraft was beyond saving, the pilot would give the signal to bail out. Then it was every man's fight for survival, grabbing parachutes, helping each other to exits, and hoping to avoid enemy fighters as they drifted down. Parachuting over enemy territory meant capture. In Europe, that usually meant a prisoner of war camp. In the Pacific, it could be far worse. Many captured airmen never came home. And for those who fell into the sea, rescue was a race against time. Air-sea operations tried to recover downed crews, but they didn't always get there soon enough. Still, what's maybe most striking is that even knowing all this, thousands of young men climbed back into those bombers day after day. The average crewman was barely in his 20s. Statistically, his odds of surviving a full tour missions were slim. The mortality rate for B-17 crews was around 20%, 50 times higher than for ground troops in Europe. And yet they kept flying. Some managed to return after being hit again and again, limping back to base in planes that looked ready to fall apart. Others never came back at all. When you read about the B-17 Flying Fortress, it's easy to focus on the technical brilliance, the design, the firepower, the range, but the human side of it is what truly defines this story. Every mission was a mix of fear, endurance, and raw courage. So yes, the B-17 was an incredible machine, a key reason the Allies could carry out strategic bombing at such a scale. But for the men inside, it was more like a fragile metal coffin soaring through the most dangerous skies of the 20th century. They called it the Flying Fortress, but for many of them, It was a fortress they never escaped. It's hard not to admire the bravery of those crews. If you'd like more stories about the people and machines that shaped history, subscribe and join me next time.